Morning. I'm Mark Olshin, the Associate Executive Vice President of B'nai B'rith and Director of the Center for Senior Services. B'nai B'rith Senior Housing is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. And as part of our celebration, we're going to be visiting with a number of folks from around the country who are instrumental in helping us get to where we are today. In 1971, we opened the first B'nai B'rith sponsored housing program, the Martin D. Popke B'nai B'rith Apartments in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. And the B'nai B'rith Network was born. From that somewhat humble beginning, we've grown to be the largest national Jewish sponsor of HUD-assisted senior housing in the United States, sponsoring 38 properties in 27 communities nationwide. From California to Florida to upstate New York, and literally everywhere in between, we're open to older persons of limited income, regardless of race, religion, or national origin. Currently, over 5,000 seniors call B'nai B'rith their home. This morning, we're joined by folks who are responsible for the B'nai B'rith Apartments and B'nai B'rith West in Allentown, Pennsylvania. I believe the apartments opened in '79, with B'nai B'rith West following in 1983, just before I actually joined B'nai B'rith. We'll be speaking with Neil Forgosh, former president of the board, and one, I believe, principally involved with the putting together of the property, Barbara Butts, the current board president, and Bob Sipos, the project administrator, who was there from the beginning and is still, for some reason, still there. And we'll talk about his plans going forward. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Neil, let's turn to you. You and Bob have been involved in the building since before it even opened. Neil is one of the driving forces behind the property. Can you explain the process that you went through and how you worked with the Senior Housing Committee in Washington to get the program up and running?
I wish I could take all that credit. The reality is there are two gentlemen, Herman Gross and Jack Singer, who went to a board meeting or convention, I'm not sure what, where the concept was brought up. And I'm assuming that was brought up by Abe Kramer. Jack and Herman came back to Allentown, and Arnold Tannenbaum was the president at the time. Arnold was a fraternity brother of mine. And he said, "Hey, Neil, what do you think of this?" I said, "Sounds interesting." And he says, "Okay, you're in charge." The reality is, if it wasn't for Abe, none of it would have happened. I have no idea how the financing came across. The only thing that I got truly involved in at the very, very beginning was one day I was home and we've been talking about a piece of property that had a lumber yard on it. The property was for sale, but they wanted a lot of money for it because of its location. And one afternoon, I wasn't feeling well, and I stayed home. I was watching the news, and there was an alert that there was a fire on Liberty Street, which was the lumber yard. I picked up the phone, called our attorney, Jerry Frank, and said, "Hey, Jerry, I think we just bought the property." And we got it. Called Dave and told him we had the property. And from that point on, it just rolled right through. And then when the building was finally completed, it was time to set up the management. And they brought down Jeanette
Boyd.
Yeah, down, who acted as the intermediate manager. We interviewed a number of people for the permanent job, and somehow Bob Sipos slipped by the committee and has been there ever since. But between Bob and Jeanette, they got the project off the ground, but it didn't take long for the building to fill up, and it's been filled ever since. How B'nai West came about, I have no idea. I had no knowledge that Abe was pushing for a second building until he called one day and said, "We got the contract." And,
So you got, but how did the application get pulled together? Because what Abe can do as the chair of the senior housing program, he could help move it along. But as far as the local property, somebody had to help pull that together. You had a consultant on board, and somebody had to pull the paperwork together and kind of get it all worked out before it could be submitted to HUD.
Yeah,
the property was part of the lumberyard, so we already owned the property.
Gotcha.
But
okay, so you already owned the property, which made it that a lot easier, obviously.
Right, and I don't know. Huh? I don't know how the second building got through. I don't remember signing any papers saying yes, we want to do it. I just remember. Oh, Bob,
was it Roger Rubin involved in that?
Who?
Roger Rubin. Wasn't he involved in putting it together?
Yeah, probably, because he was.
I know that name. I know that name. I don't know.
Yeah. I think he was partly one with Jerry Frank that drew up the paperwork and all that. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, and I have a gut feeling that it was in their mind all along that they were going to do that second building.
Well, if you had the property, it would have made perfect sense to do an add-on.
But they had to do it under two separate projects. So that's why there's a B'nai West Corporation and a B'nai House Corporation.
Yeah, well, back in the day, that's the way it was set up. Each group would submit the application would be basically for one property on one site. You wouldn't be doing two or three together. The way we did it in other properties around the country was you'd have a larger piece of property, you build one building, and then you'd have the other land available for another submission. So I'm sure that's how it worked.
Yeah, I think, Neil, there was also, corporation was involved for a long time trying to get this going because they actually owned a property in between or next to the lumberyard, which was a hardware store, Shelley Hardware, I believe. Right, Neil? The corporation owned that.
It was?
Yeah, they owned that piece, but that was landlocked by the lumberyard and the railroad, and HUD wouldn't let you build on that. And then the fire happened, and I thought that opened up the door for the project. That was my recollection, but
yeah,
did you guys actually own the property in between at one point? But
I didn't remember that, but okay, that's a possibility.
Yeah,
well, it sounds like it's a rather, again, and all you're really pointing out is how difficult and how complicated some of these programs can be. Even in the old days when there was money and the programs were pretty well structured. Obviously, getting everything done locally was a major piece, and sometimes it wasn't as easy as it sounded. As we talk to a number of other properties around the country, there'll be similar types of stories that we'll be hearing, and some of them I'm more familiar with. Obviously, yours I'm not, since you guys predate me by a few years. I'm not as old as you are, Bob.
Well, I do know that the both buildings have been 100% occupied from day one. The waiting list is still very strong, and the management group has been unbelievable. Bob and the people he's hired and have working for him have been phenomenal.
Speaking of,
I am duly impressed with the new manager. She and Bob have set the building up that we have controlled the virus within the building to I would say 95% success rate, maybe even better than that, and have been very, very, very good in keeping the building healthy. The gentleman on the left is Jack Singer, who was one of the two men who came back from the conference and brought the whole concept to Allentown. The guy to his left, I don't know him.
Who's that with the
Beard,
all that dark
They
hair?
hired somebody with a beard.
Yeah, a lot of dark hair at that point.
And the three ladies were one of the first tenants of the building. And,
What was it like when those first tenants actually came to the property and they actually moved in? Do you remember their reactions and how they felt when they actually walked into the building and saw where they'll be living?
I hadn't recalled that picture or the event. Bob, do you remember?
Oh yeah, yeah. They were obviously they were thrilled to be here, and because it was a brand new building, they had their pickup apartments. But they were the first three people that were in the building, and when I left at night, I felt so bad leaving them in this huge building with just the three of them. So we made sure they each had each phone number. I gave them my home phone number. At that point, we had pagers, so I gave them my pager number and said, if you need anything, let me know. But they were fine. The next morning, they were happy as could be and had no problems. But it was just kind of intimidating leaving these three ladies in this huge building all alone.
How many units were in the first building?
150 units.
150.
Yeah.
And in West?
In West is 120.
Okay.
Right.
But West wasn't built at that point.
No, that was, yeah.
Yeah.
We're talking about the first building, but I just wanted to get a sense
Right.
of the numbers of units.
Yeah, so they were the only three in the building for a few days, and then slowly people started to move in. But it had to be very intimidating for them, and I was really concerned about them. So I tried to give them every comfort we could. But they were ecstatic to be there. So.
And if I recall, I think 150 units was roughly the size of the properties that were getting funded, back in those days. Could get a little more than that, but generally it was 150. That was the kind of the number that HUD kind of focused on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's why the Neighborhood West was a separate project, and that's the way it described it, that it wouldn't give money for building bigger than 150 units.
Yeah, that's the one that they kind of were going to, because they felt it for management and construction, that was what they were focusing on. So they were trying, I think there were some larger buildings earlier than yours, but they started moving to the slightly smaller properties. And then, of course, we can talk later, but we went into some buildings that are, with the smallest building we have is 36 units. So you can see things changed over the years.
Right.
So we were also lucky in that both of our buildings fell in the time frame where we got all one-bedroom apartments.
Right.
Some other buildings had to deal with efficiencies.
Right.
I know Wilkes-Barre, I'm pretty sure, had efficiencies in Scranton, and a lot of the buildings had efficiencies to deal with. But our program both fell in that period that we got the one-bedroom. Right.
There was a 10% efficiency. Generally, that a requirement that 10% of the units had to be efficiencies.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get out of that?
It just seemed like the contracts that we got fell in between those rules, but when they applied the rules. Yeah, I believe right after B'nai House, they had them for a while, and then right before B'nai West, they stopped or whatever. But we just wound up with one bedrooms in both buildings, so that was good.
That was terrific.
Yeah, I don't remember that even being an issue or a discussion.
Yeah.
I remember it as being a one bedroom buildings from day one.
Right. Well, we were, but some of the other buildings around the same time frame wound up with efficiencies.
By the time I came in '83, all the properties had to have some efficiencies, and that's just the way the program had evolved. Bob, I'm sure you're aware, because I know we did talk about it, but you are the longest serving management professional in the B'nai Housing Network. Congratulations.
Thank you.
We won't let him go.
I don't blame you. Frankly, I don't blame you. With a head of hair like that, I wouldn't let him go either. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you got involved and how they sucked you into taking this position, and how you remained putting up with all this for all these years?
Well, I had been a school teacher before this, and I was interested. I had heard about the housing field and the HUD subsidized housing coming out, so I actually applied for another job prior to this in Bethlehem, but someone with more experience got that job. But somehow the board chose me, and actually Mrs. Boyer was not my biggest fan, but
Get in line.
Arnold and Neil chose me over her objections. She thought I was going to run the place into the ground very quickly, but they still decided to choose me, and the board has always been supportive. I mean, when you ask someone if they think they're going to be at a job for 40 years, it's inconceivable to think that you'll be there that long. But I've had offers during the years, but I never had any interest in going anywhere else because I had a great staff. Was very happy. The board was very supportive and cooperative. Always took very good care of me, and also took very good care of the building. So we were never knocking heads. They were very supportive of what we need to do to keep the buildings up and running and in good condition. So it's always been a pleasure. I've had the opportunity of being able to come into a job for 40 plus years that I look forward to coming in every day. And not a lot of people can say that. So,
well, I'm now in my 38th year, and I can almost say the same thing. There are times that I figure, what am I doing here? But and I'm sure my colleagues have the same feeling. But overall, I think it's, for me, it's been very positive. And when you find something you can enjoy and you really enjoy going to, and you see the fruits of your labor, you see what you're doing and the impact you have, especially with older people, it's a very satisfying, or can be a very satisfying, place to be.
The day-to-day operation of housing the tenants and giving people housing that makes their lives much easier and much more affordable is the real payback, and just helping them spend the rest of their lives in a comfortable, secure setting.
How did you see the type of resident change over the years, from the early days to applications that you see now coming through? I know that the program has changed in very substantial ways. I recall back when you needed to basically evacuate your apartment under your own, you're by yourself. That was basically what they would call criteria for independent living. I know that has changed for a variety of reasons. So how have you seen the changes in the types of residents, the types of disabilities they might bring, and other challenges for you as a management professional?
Yeah, we've always used the term living in an independent manner, which keeps us out of trouble for the most part.
Right.
Because of course you have a lot of people who may be mobility impaired that have aides and attendants, but they can direct their own affairs. They're not maybe independent, what some people would consider, but they are living in an independent manner on their own, and it doesn't involve us.
How about the aging issues as far as aging in place? Do you find that people were more independent early on and less so now? Is there a greater mix going in? I know, or how have you dealt with the people who came in very independent, and how have you been able to accommodate as their needs changed over time?
Yeah, it seems that when we first opened, the people that were coming in were a little younger, because at that point it was either you stay in your own home or you go to a nursing home, and there wasn't a lot in between. So apartments like ours offer people a great alternative where they didn't have to worry about taking care of a home or paying the high rent in an apartment, and they could come and live in a place like the Emeritus Apartments, be able to afford it, and not have to worry about shoveling snow or fixing things or whatever. As people age in place, we've been able to work with different agencies. We have a service coordinator, which I know most of the buildings have. She's been invaluable in helping to identify problems and also helping to find resources for them. We try and work with families as much as we can to help the tenants. I mean, there are some people that have no family, and then you've got to work with the agencies. It seems that people who are coming in now may be a little bit older, because people are staying in their homes or apartments a little longer in that, but still pretty much facing the same aging in place problems. They just may happen a little later. It may take maybe in the 85s or 90s until you get to the aging in place. But interestingly enough, we have a lady who's, I believe she's 102 now, and she just got through a battle with COVID, and she's doing great.
Is she an original resident?
She's not an original resident, but she's been here a long time, and she was when our fitness center was open, which is closed right now because of COVID. But when our fitness center was open, she was down there almost every day on the machines and working out, and got a great spirit. And she got, we were concerned when she got COVID because of her age and all that, but she got through it fine and still smiling. So that's always nice to see,
That's terrific. Barbara, we haven't forgotten about you.
Okay.
You're the, I understand, the current president of the board, as
I am.
I'm well aware. Can you talk about how you got involved with these crazy guys and this property, and then how have you found your role as president? And can you give us a little sense of that process?
Sure, I can. My history starts, at birth. So my dad was Arnold Tannenbaum. So I remember when he was building the buildings. I was 10 years old. Sorry. I'm so sorry. But yeah, it was a big deal in my house. My dad spent a lot of time on it, and I know Neil did as well. I know Ari had Neil's son had a story about walking through the buildings before they were done, and we would go and see the construction site. It was very exciting. My dad was very excited, very proud of it. So it had always been, from the time I was very little. My dad did he passed away in 1983, right when the second building was finished. And then I guess soon after, I'm not really sure when that would have been, but my mother went on the board, and then she served, well, she still serves, but she was also president.
She was president, right?
A 15-year period. Yeah. So I joined the board in 1999. She was president at that time. And soon after I came on the board, I started teaching the craft class in the building. And so I taught 2 classes every month. And that was a really wonderful experience. Not only did I really get to know the residents, of them was Bob's mother, which was, she was lovely. I loved her. She was in my class the entire time I taught the class, which was almost 15 years or a little more than 15 years. So, I really got to know the women really well. And there were times that we would just sit around the table and talk, and they would tell me how they felt about living in the buildings and what that meant to them. Some of the women had really hard lives, really difficult, a lot of trauma, and more than one of them had said to me that this was by far the best place they had ever lived. And they were so thankful and so grateful, and they absolutely loved it there. And, we do the work because we love the work and we understand what we're doing, and how we're helping people. But to sit around the table and hear people talk about that, and that's their life and their community, it was very impactful, and it really stays with me in every decision we make around the boardroom, for sure. To know that we're helping someone in their life in the last years, in their twilight years, when they really, when you just want to relax and you just want to, feel safe and secure. And
that kind of leads me into the next question for you is, obviously we talked briefly, but I visited the building I'd been there a while back, way back. But when I first joined B'nai B'rith, and I used to do a tour in that general, Pennsylvania area, seeing all those buildings. But when I came to your 40th anniversary party, and I believe you remember, we went in and you showed me around a little bit. The building obviously is in great shape. It certainly does not look its age by any stretch of the imagination. It's still beautiful. How is it that the board and the building staff, of course, knowing you have Bob and his people, how do you keep the building in such good shape over all these years? And how do you ensure that it will remain as good as it is now for the next 20, 30, 40 years for the next generation of residents who will be living there. What are your thoughts along those lines? I mean, how do you do it? I mean, because I've seen buildings that have aged well and some have aged less well.
Right. I think, coming on the board sort of halfway through its life so far, certainly the original founders and Bob and the staff, I think our main motto is balancing, keeping it beautiful and keeping it safe and keeping it maintained. I don't think everybody feels very strongly about keeping everything current and working, and nothing gets left behind, nothing gets left go. Things are constantly being updated and modernized, and we don't just work on the maintenance part of it, but we also work on the look of it. So things get redecorated periodically, and I think it really keeps the place looking beautiful and bright. And I mean, things break. Buildings are now 40 years old, so things are starting to need more maintenance than they had been. But I think the board and the staff's main goal is to keep up with everything, and we do, and that's important. When we don't skimp, I think, and we don't spend wastefully, but we're not miserly to the point of having things fall apart. So it's a balance. It's definitely a balance, but I think the entire staff and board are on the same page, and our goals are the same. And I think that's shown in the decisions we make.
As we all know, everything ages. The residents we talked about, they age in place. The physical plant ages. You touched on some of that. We'll get into that in just a minute. But then also the board of directors age. And we know that just from our conversation thus far, but there seems to be more of a familial relationship in your situation. How have you seen that change, and how does that impact going forward for the future of the property? How do you envision those kinds of decisions made about bringing people onto the board, and how do you handle those kinds of things?
Well, that's an issue in process. I have the board had remained the same for so long. Certain people came and went, but pretty much it was the same people.
Right.
And so
which is not unlike many of the other properties around the country that way.
I would imagine so. I think so. Now we're coming to the point that I need other people on the board.
Yep,
and
exactly.
So we have actually turned it a bit around. We do have several new people that are younger or, in various careers that can bring different dynamics to the board or different viewpoints. So I'm always looking. I'm always sort of scanning my base of people to see who might want to come on. Leadership is a problem. It's hard to find people to lead. A lot of people like to do the work or don't mind doing the work if you tell them what to do. And I found this all through my volunteer career. Certain people lead, certain people, like to be told what to do. And you need both, but we're a little short on the leading side. So, I have to kind of figure that out. And that's an evolution, I think.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. I know, or I believe you underwent a significant refinancing not too long ago. How was that handled, and how is that going to be handled in the future? How does that set you up for the next number of years?
I think Bob could probably speak a little better on that. But in this business, for lack of a better word, there is not a lot of ways to really find more money. Like expenses go up, but you're pretty much your money stays the same. So it is a welcome when these little opportunities come up to give yourself a little more room during the month, it's a really nice opportunity. So we're thrilled about that. I think Bob could probably say more realistically or more practically how that's panning out during the months.
Bob, do you want to jump in?
Sure, yeah. Well, we had done 2 major refinances in 2008 and 2011, which were complete refinances. But lately, last year, we had the option to do an interest rate reduction, which was a lot less involved and a lot less costly than a full refinance. But it still reduced our interest rate greatly from, I think it was 4.7 to 3.0, gave us a significant savings per year. A large part of which we then turned around and put into our reserve replacement account, because we need to bolster that back up, because as Barbara said, with the buildings getting older, it costs more and more to maintain them, and reserve replacement account keeps depleting faster than we can refinance it. So large part of what we say we are depositing into the reserve replacement account. But the interest rate reduction was a big help for us, just to keep things going and keep our finances in good shape for coming years.
Well, I have one more question. We have at B'nai B'rith really spent a lot of time trying to coalesce the properties and provide for our training programs and our calls and Zoom calls and all the things. And I know that you've been a part of this for many years. How do you see this? How do you feel the connection to B'nai B'rith, and how do you feel that we have, as an organization, have worked to help you do what you guys do at the local level?
Well, I think the support of the B'nai B'rith International has always been welcome, and the knowledge that you guys have, and you have a kind of an ear to Washington and know what's going on there. I know the Zoom meetings you have. As I said, one of the things that came out of it was our COVID clinic from a tip from B'nai B'rith International. I know that you've had a lot of good information on how to handle the COVID scenario and things like that. But I mean, going back years, we've been in touch over the years when we've had any issues or whatever, that you were able to help us walk through, and different things like that. So the knowledge and the kind of knowing what's going on in Washington has been always helpful.
Yeah, well, I know that Janelle has taken over a lot of the training programs.
Training's been great, yeah.
I know Barbara, you've attended some of the programs as well, and Neil in the past. But we try to do that. We hope to do in-person meetings again when all this kind of goes away. But we still found that the virtual trainings are actually more highly attended, because obviously it's easier. So we've gotten a lot more board members, people who don't normally come to the in-person training, have really been involved in the virtual programs. And so we're planning, I know Janelle has already planned to maintain at least one formal virtual meeting of everybody a year. And hopefully in the fall, we'll be able to go back to in-person. But we've recognized that we can reach more people through this medium than we can having just in-person. But our goal obviously is to provide as much information to you out there that we can. And hopefully that's working for you.
I do want to say one thing about your programming. I will tell you, I had several ladies in my craft class who had been to the summer camp at Perlman, and they loved it. I mean, they came back with this renewed energy like you had no idea. I don't think any of them had ever, had ever gone to camp, that's not something that they did. And they just loved all of the information, and they came back and they were really rejuvenated to do their tenants association and to bring it back to their community. So that really is a fabulous program.
You don't know how happy you just made Janelle feel.
I know she puts a lot into it.
She has a smile right now from ear to ear. And I'm telling you, when we get off this call, she's going to be so excited because, I started that program in 1987. And it actually came about from a vacation program that I had been witness to. And so I thought it made sense to bring people who are volunteering mostly as directors or officers of their resident councils. And I wanted to kind of give them something special for the work they were putting in and the time they were spending. And so we said, well, let's bring them up to camp and give them a camp experience. Many of them had never been to a camp. And then we took them around and we gave them, arts and crafts and doing all the camp stuff. And then we did some training about how you develop councils and how they can work together in newsletters, et cetera, to make their lives more complete at the buildings. And so that's how it started. And then Janelle got involved some years later and obviously enjoyed it and thought of ways to expand it. And so this is now her baby. And she's done a fantastic job over the years. And like you said, this is not something we haven't heard before, but it's always nice to hear again.
Right. It was. And, I also will say that I was president for a few years before I had gone to the annual meeting, thinking that, well, I know what I'm doing. It's no big deal, But I will say, having gone to that gave me so much more perspective on, I didn't even realize the whole system. Like there was a lot of stuff I just didn't even realize. I just sort of took it over from my mom and that was it. So it was really enlightening. It was, I picked up some things here and there that I would report back to the board. And I would, when we go back to it, I will go to another if I can. But they're not wasted. I think it is a very, I think it's a good experience, and I think it really gives. And as I'm hoping, our board changes and maybe other people start taking leadership roles, then I can send them to it, and they can feel more invested. So I think it's a good thing.
Oh, we appreciate that because that's really our goal. We want to get not just information out to the field, but we want the field to feel like they're connected. We want them to understand that they're not alone, and that there are other programs within the B'nai B'rith system that all kind of came from the same place. So they get to learn from each other. And, everyone has their own networks locally, but to see this from a national perspective, I think is it's something a little different, a little special. And I think the quality of the programming is really, it's just, there's no match to it. I mean, get the same people and many people. I mean, we've got great relationships with HUD in spite of all the things that have happened over the years and how things have changed in Washington. But we still maintain really good contacts with the career people, the people who know these properties, know the programs, and still feel for the residents who live there. But I wanted to thank each of you, and it was great to catch up with you, Neil. It's been great to see you again, and Bob, for as always. I'm still so jealous about your, I don't care what color it is, but you still got it. So that to me is really where I'm coming from. So thank you all.